As hard an act as Pierre Berton is to follow, the mantle of Canada's unofficial social historian now appears to be falling to Charlotte Gray. With her recent biography of Alexander Graham Bell and her earlier best-selling books about Pauline Johnson, Susanna Moody, Catherine Parr Traill, Mackenzie King's mother, and my favorite, a museum called Canada, Ms. Gray has established her credentials for this role. She's a journalist, professor, historian, television personality, author, and chair of the Canadian History Centre, Charlotte Gray.
My approach to history has always been, I want to write books that I want to read. Because when I came to Canada from Britain, I started reading the history, and there was wonderful history, but always in the third paragraph, there was somebody either actually or metaphorically saying, "Come on, boys, follow me," as they tramped across the prairies, as they started pioneering, as they discovered the rivers, as they built the railway, as they led the charge. It was a very male history, so I had a wonderful time because nobody else seemed to be doing women's history, and I was very happy to get into that line of business. So I'm going to tell you, first of all, about one of the women I wrote about, Susanna Moody, who came here in 1832. And she did not know what she was doing. She came from a middle-class English background, a very nice house, much nicer than the one I grew up in. She was already a literary personality in London, but she was a young woman. She was in her late 20s when she arrived with a husband and a small child, and they came because her husband was eligible to have free land in the colonies. They had no idea what they were coming to. They came, they arrived in Upper Canada. She had thought that there would be lots of people there who her husband would employ, and they would build a house. In fact, they had to start by cutting the trees down once they got to their plot of land, which was just near Lakefield. And they had no cash. Every now and then, John would have to disappear and get a job with the British Army somewhere else, just to bring some cash into this household. She had to grow all the food. One time, she was there by herself in January, about 20 yards from a lake, and she had 4 small children. It's -20. The chimney catches fire. She's in a wooden house, a log cabin. She has a servant called Jenny, but she is the only adult there, and she has these infants, and she had to cope with this, her house on fire. She was incredibly resourceful. She dragged a huge chest of drawers out. She then put all the warm clothing in the drawers and put her children in the drawers of the chest of drawers, and she got everybody out, and she managed to get her brother, who was about half a mile away, to come, and some of the other locals, they came with buckets of water. They managed to put the fire out. Okay, just you imagine doing that. Not just the women, the guys too. Would you be able to put a fire out in -20 degrees in January in Canada without thinking, where's my cell phone? Where's the fire brigade? Where's everything I'm used to? One winter, she's starving, literally starving. The only way that she is going to survive is by doing something that she had absolutely promised her little daughter Katie she wouldn't do. Katie has a pet pig called Hector. Finally, they are starving, and Jenny says to Susanna Moody, "Miss, we're going to have to kill the pig. We don't have any other food." They've lived on potatoes for about 5 weeks at this point, and they finally realized that Hector has to go. They killed the pig. They ate it, and then they gave the bones to Spot, the dog, and he sniffed at them and turned his back and walked away, because he knew it was his friend Hector. They used to play together. And Susanna records all this. So animal empathy, she knew it. She'd seen it. So I'm telling you, her life would make most of us feel absolutely desperate, far more desperate than those women on television, where I think desperation springs purely from boredom. Susanna was never bored. She was too busy. She was milking the cows. She was getting up early to light the fire. She was making porridge. She was making all the food for the kids. She was keeping chickens. She was looking after the kitchen garden. And when she'd done a full day of that, and her children were in bed, she sat down and wrote all her experiences. So why was she desperate? Not for any of the reasons that certainly I would have thought. She was desperate for an idea that had captured her and that was the wrong idea for the new country. I mentioned Jenny. Jenny was an Irish maid. Susanna had come from England, and she had brought with her all her class prejudices, all that wonderful hierarchy based not on merit, but on birth that existed in Britain at the beginning of the 19th century, and many would say blah, 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 blah today. She'd brought it with her. When she came to Canada, she realized that this was going to be an extremely difficult experience for her. All these challenges, all these new people, and she wanted to cling on to what she knew. They are in a one-room log cabin. And what is the idea that makes her desperate? The idea that makes her desperate is that her servant might eat at the same table as her, because this goes against all her views of how life should be. It's actually quite ironic because, you know, she lived in an area where there were Chippewa Indians, and the Indians were absolutely marvelous to the Moody family and to other settlers. And when they saw they were starving, they would quietly leave gifts of fish or game on their doorsteps. And Susanna was very appreciative of this. And when the Chippewa Indians came to visit, she would invite them to sit at her table with her in the log cabin, but she would not have Jenny eat with her. And it wasn't until she'd made the transition to realizing, actually, that is not a very smart thing to do in a country where there's tons of land, few people, and you need to rely on each other. To build these kind of barriers between individuals is not smart. And then Susanna, she was one smart cookie. She did a complete volte-face. She realized that there was not going to be a class system in Canada like the one she knew in England. But of course, she's English, so she still wants to be on top. So she still thinks, you know, I'm part of the British Empire, I've still got to sort of somehow assert, but she realizes it's got to be a meritocracy. And so she then becomes a huge supporter of public education. And so when we talk about building equality in society today, building equal opportunities for everybody, one of the things that Canada has today, and that we still have, even though it's being eroded, is a really good public education system. And it was because people like Susanna had switched ideas of how you establish the society. You can probably tell that I love what I do. I'm absolutely passionate about it. I love writing biographies. I always want my readers to say to me, I know you didn't invent anything, but it did read like a novel, because I really try extremely hard that my readers can actually see, taste, smell, feel the experiences that the individuals I write about. We have extraordinary characters in our history who I've enjoyed writing about, and for whom some of what we've heard over the last 3 days would not be news. Thank you.